Auburn suffers a historic collapse at the hands of Mississippi State, and the Tigers lose their starting quarterback for the remainder of the season as Bo Nix suffers an ankle injury. All that and more on today's Locked On Auburn.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, before we jump into the conversation with Lindsay, our regular Monday guest, and myself, we recorded that early Sunday morning. Rumors were heavy, and we talk about it throughout that show. But obviously, since Sunday morning, the rumors have been confirmed. Auburn quarterback Bo Nix suffered an ankle injury at the hands of Mississippi State. We all saw him kind of hobbling around and fighting through the pain. Looks like he re-aggravated something towards the end of the game, which was later confirmed by Justin Hokanson. That long, deep pass to Javarius Johnson in the third quarter is when he got hit and injured it again, made his ankle significantly worse, according to reports. And that's kind of what they're dealing with right now. So it sounds like he will have surgery and he will miss the rest of the season. Early Sunday, the timetable stuff wasn't quite solidified, so we touch on that a little bit, but obviously, TJ Finley went in to replace Bo Nix at the end of the game, and TJ Finley appears to be the guy who will start against South Carolina next week, and then, of course, the following week in the Iron Bowl against Alabama. So, obviously, there's been a lot of folks that are pro Bo Nix, a lot of folks that are pro TJ Finley. We will get to see that. But, of course, the most important thing, thoughts and prayers towards Bo Nix. You know that guy is a fighter. You can say what you want about him. He wants to be out there with his football team. And so it's going to be tough for him to not be out there and not be Auburn's quarterback for the remainder of the season. So TJ Finley's got his hands full. It's going to be tough not to judge everything he does, but you've got to remember, and we touch on this later in today's show, but he hasn't had 10 weeks worth of starting reps. And at this point of the season, that's kind of something that you need to be able to compete at a high level. So take that into consideration when you're watching him this Saturday. And we'll talk about this all week here on Locked On Auburn, but wanted to touch on this. Lindsay and I talk about it as if it's probably going to happen, but it was still just rumor at that point. But reports have been there. Hey, Hokanson of AuburnLive.com also talked about Anders Carlson. It appears that he has torn his ACL and he will miss the rest of the season as well. So all in all, a pretty much a terrible worst case scenario for Auburn football is what happened Saturday night. All right, let's jump into the rest of the show. Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single day. On this Money Monday, the Auburn banker himself, Lindsay Crosby, joins us as he does every week. And what an absolute disaster we watched Saturday as the Auburn Tigers, just probably the biggest collapse in program history is what we got to watch against Mississippi State, Lindsay, a team that Auburn is better than, faster than, bigger than, more talented than. None of it mattered in the second half because Mississippi State could do no wrong and Auburn could do no right. And we all saw it coming. It was just like death from a million paper cuts. Terrible, terrible Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that was not very cash money of the Auburn Tigers there to just decide not to play defense for three quarters. So I will say this, and people who listen to the show a lot and are on our Discord know this. I am an Atlanta sports fan. I'm a Braves fan. I'm a Falcons fan. Got my World Series merch right here, Atlanta Champs. Now Auburn fans know what it feels like to blow a 28-3 lead. And this wasn't even a championship. This was just a regular season game. Yeah. That was, I think the worst part you touched on is we saw it coming.
Right.
Midway through the third quarter, I was like, okay, yeah, no, we have zero answers for this. We do not know what to do. And they just started scoring on every single possession. Like, that was the hardest part. It'd be different if it was fluky. If it was fluke, a tipped pass caught for a touchdown, a fumble recovery. No, this was just second half started. Will Rogers starts moving the ball at will, and you're like, oh no, we're in trouble. and it just keeps happening. And he had more touchdown passes in the second half than incompletions. I mean, just awful showing by the defense, the players, and the coaching staff. And the offense didn't help them out any. And just what a rough game.
Will Rogers, 44 of 55 passing, 415 yards, 6 touchdowns against this Auburn defense that really didn't do a whole lot to adjust, a whole lot to change. They were very happy with rushing 3 for the vast majority of the game, which is interesting. Then you saw them start blitzing a little bit, sending a 4th guy, and then they actually got pressure. But yeah, the 55 dropbacks, I think Auburn had 2 sacks, which is not enough. And that's something that I talked about all week is like, I don't think Auburn's pass rush is going to be good enough to slow down Mississippi State. I didn't think it would be to this degree, but I did say that was the matchup where like, I don't like that one. I don't like that going into this game. And unfortunately it transpired the way that it did. But we'll talk about the quarterback situation a little bit later in the show, but the whole Bo Nix, TJ Finley dynamic is still a fascinating conversation that Auburn fans are determined to have. But there were just so many different things outside of the quarterbacks where it's like, okay, Tate Bigsby could not run the football. He could not get that going. And in fact, Auburn's rushing attack, while technically it had 106 yards on the day, 57 of them were from Javarius Johnson's catch and run on that RPO, but it was a backwards pass, so it counts as a run. But his 57 yards, if you take that out, Auburn was abysmal on the ground. And Tate Bigsby was 16 of 41. He scored 2 touchdowns, but 2.6 yards per carry. That is not good enough, especially when this offense is not consistent enough. But Lindsay, the thing that's so crazy about all of this is the offense looks so clean, so crisp in the first half where it's like, okay, this is kind of going to be a bounce back game. And then all of a sudden, if you could do this against South Carolina, based on, what happened with Ole Miss and A&M, it's like the Iron Bowl could mean something. And Auburn didn't do their part. And because they just totally fell apart in the second half. Bo was asked about that in the post-game presser. And he had this answer about how like it went dead for a little bit and like the momentum was never brought back. Weird answer, probably a little too honest, but I'm cool with it. It's fine. I think people are picking that apart, saying like he's blaming on the crowd. I don't think that's it at all. But he's just talking about there was a moment where momentum shifted and Auburn never got it back. I think he was true on that. So yeah, I don't know, man. Where do you want to start with all of this?
All right. So first thing I want to do is just make you feel even worse about that whole Will Rogers thing.
Okay.
Because I want to point out that, and I have it right here, he started 5 of 11. So then after that, he went 39 of 44 with 6 touchdowns. So like he only, after the first quarter, he threw 3 incompletions. He doubled up incompletions to touchdowns. Like I understand the air raid is designed to neutralize your pass rush. You want to get the ball out quickly. And Auburn obviously was not getting there with 3. Right. And at a certain point in time, you have to decide, okay, I'm going to send a 4th rusher from somewhere. And you saw Mason do that after we lost the lead. It took 40 unanswered points for Derek Mason to say, okay, maybe we should try something else. And it seems to me, it reminds me a lot of how Gus Malzahn would just consistently like call a dive up the middle, even when it hasn't worked for 3 quarters. He's like, this is what I do. This is going to happen. This is how we're going to do it. And he just wouldn't give up on it until it was too late. And I feel like that's the biggest confusing thing to me is why did it take 40 unanswered points for Derek Mason to make a simple adjustment as sending a 4th guy? And when he did, we saw the first time he did that, it was a sack. The second time he did that, right after it, it would have been a sack if not for that TD Moultrie call that I really want to take a minute and talk about probably next segment.
Sure.
But why did it take so long to make such a simple adjustment when we all knew that was something you should have done before you gave up 40 points?
This is a fireable offense, right? I'm not saying anyone's going to get fired, but you could, right? Like you could fire people after this performance.
One, it's the first season, and so you're hesitant to fire a coordinator in the first season. But this was a fireable offense.
Yeah,
this was. I mean,
this happened. If it was against Bama or Georgia, and you just had a really hot first quarter, and maybe you returned a kick for a touchdown, had a defensive score or something, and it's like, oh wow, you're up 25 points against a team that's better than you, and then they came back and did this. I think we're feeling a little bit different. This is a team. Mississippi State is not better than Auburn, especially in Jordan-Hare Stadium. That to me is the thing, is who it is. Who it is definitely plays a part in this big equation. I think this is totally a fireable offense. Do I think that folks will get fired? I don't know.
No.
I really don't. As we record this early Sunday morning, no one has. But I don't think you can just let this go. And from a messaging standpoint, like, this isn't okay. I mean, this was the biggest collapse in program history. And you can't just sit there and be like, okay, yeah, the answer to this is we're just going to push our guys harder this week in practice. I think there has to be something that happens here.
I don't see Auburn firing anybody right now, but if Derek Mason is not the defensive coordinator next year, and you gave Brian Harsin truth serum, he would tell you it's because of this game. Now, I don't know if Mason's going to be here or not. I don't know if he's going to get a job offer to be a head coach somewhere else, or if we're going to encourage him to move on or whatever. But if he's not the coordinator and Brian Harsin was required to tell the truth, he would tell you it's because we gave up 40 unanswered points to Mississippi State.
Do you think Derek Mason is Auburn's DC next year? I do not. I don't think.
I do not anymore. No. And to me, it's been something, not necessarily, he's a good defensive coach. Let's put that out there. He is a good defensive coach, but he's too inflexible as far as what he wants to do versus the personnel he has. We've seen Auburn in recent history put a bunch of defensive backs, a bunch of cornerbacks in the NFL. I want to say there's 4 guys on rosters right now that are starters that were Auburn cornerbacks under the previous regime. And every single one of them was known for their athleticism and their abilities in man coverage. And Derek Mason has said, no, I'm a zone guy. This is what I'm going to do. And he's been, in my mind, a little too rigid with it. And I don't see Auburn saying, yeah, let's keep him around. Obviously, this is working. Because he's too unwilling to make adjustments we saw that on Saturday.
Yeah, you have a first-round corner on your roster right now in Roger McCreary, and you can't craft a game plan to limit what happens Saturday. That's a major unforced error, in my opinion. Hey, today's show brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a leader in daily college sports fantasy. I absolutely love it. Have listeners message me all the time how much fun Prize Picks is. Charlie 5 actually texted me late last night after I fell asleep saying, like, hey, one big on Prize Picks. So be sure to check it out. When you go to Prize Picks, use promo code Locked On when you make that first deposit, and they'll match whatever your deposit is up to $100. So you can get a free $100 right there just for playing Prize Picks. You can pick up to 2 to 5 players over under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. You also could do it with fantasy scores as well. Don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com today. Use promo code Locked On or go to your app store to download the app. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. On this Money Monday, our guest, Lindsay Crosby. All right, so penalties. Penalty yards were a big deal, and it seems like not only were the yards a lot, but the timing of all of them was really unfortunate. But Auburn, 9 penalties, 88 yards. And like I said, the timing of a lot of those was very, very crucial. But you've got thoughts on this.
Yes, I do. I mean, we had 3 pass interference penalties, but the thing I want to talk about is the concept of targeting. So the point of introducing the targeting rule was player safety, right? Like they told us, this is why we're doing this. We want these players to understand that if you go after somebody and you hit them in a way that can hurt them, we are going to remove you from the game. And if you do it late enough in the game, we're going to make you miss part of next week's game. We're going to hurt your team for you doing this.
Right.
So we see Kobe Hudson, who, if Auburn wins that game, that's the Kobe Hudson game.
He's a hero.
I mean, he is
a natural receiver.
So natural. That was his coming out party. I mean, Kobe Hudson looked like the best receiver on the field. 8 catches, 107 yards, and a touchdown. Just looked fantastic. But
Kobe
Hudson's
one-handed little action in the end zone. Like, give it to me, Kobe. That was awesome.
Kobe Hudson, emphasis on the Kobe.
Right.
But Kobe Hudson's coming over the middle. Defensive backs coming in to break the pass up and just blows Kobe Hudson up. And they throw a flag for targeting. And after review, they pick it up. And the explanation that the broadcast crew's trying to give is like, the defensive back has the right to play the ball. The defensive back is allowed to play the ball, and the contact is incidental. Nobody hits somebody that hard on incidental contact. And then you see TD Moultrie. I mentioned earlier that second sack we had. The very next play, TD Moultrie breaks loose. Had a lot of snaps from the interior, which I like that against a passing team.
No, that was definitely a game plan thing. Putting those guys on the inside. I like that.
But he breaks through. He sees Will Rogers cocked back to fire, so he leaves his feet to swat a ball down. Will Rogers pulls the ball in, so TD Moultrie hits the ground, wraps up Will Rogers, goes to the ground. He leads with his chest, arms out to wrap him up. And you can see TD Moultrie's helmet makes contact with Will Rogers' helmet. TD wasn't leading with his helmet. He's leading with his chest, arms out to wrap him up. As he's coming down, you see TD Moultrie kind of turn to the side so he doesn't land on Will Rogers. He lands on the side, so he doesn't come down on top of him. They throw a targeting flag, late flag too, review it, and uphold it. And so it
wasn't even technically a flag, right? They just they huddled up after the play.
Oh, yeah.
We're reviewing this.
It was called down from the booth. They said, hey, we want to review that for targeting, so that the flag was late.
Which makes it significantly worse.
Yeah, and so to me, you have a defensive back who is not playing the ball. He wants to blow a receiver up. And you can tell because as soon as he gets off the ground, he doesn't even look for the ball. He just starts celebrating because he got a big hit in. He's not called for targeting. The receiver is injured. The receiver is a defenseless receiver. He is on the ground, hurt, comes back in the game later, thankfully.
Thank goodness, yeah.
That's not targeting. But TD Moultrie, who doesn't a defender have the right to play the ball? TD Moultrie briefly leaves his feet to play the ball, gets back on the ground, hits the quarterback. No malicious intent there. You can tell because he's leading with the chest. He deliberately tries not to land on the quarterback, and they call that targeting. So don't tell me that the intent of targeting is for player health and safety. Just admit that targeting is to protect the quarterback, or come out and tell me you blew that play. Because TD Moultrie, there was no intent there. That was not targeting. And if the broadcast crew can admit that wasn't targeting, you really screwed up, because the TV broadcast never gets anything right.
No, they don't. But I mean, that was such a big moment. Auburn was about to force him to kick, and
that was third down. It was like 3rd and 25 because the previous sack or something. I mean, that's a big momentum swing.
Yeah, it was a 10-point swing. I mean,
it extends the drive. Yeah, more. I mean, that Auburn had a chance to come back and win the game until that happened. That was the thing that stopped. Now, Auburn lost this game. I'm not saying that the call is the reason they didn't win, but I'm saying they lost the chance to win. They lost the chance to come back when that call happened. It was garbage.
Kobe had a great game. Javarius Johnson had an outstanding game.
Short King coming out, baby.
Yeah, I think Bo had a solid game. 27 of 41, 377 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. And that doesn't include that 57-yard RPO that was originally called as a pass, and then later it was a backwards pass. So it was running. So I mean, he was responsible for over 400 yards. People still had 400. Bo Nix, but Lindsay, if going into this game, if you would have been told Auburn scores 34 points, do they win? Without hesitation, I'm like, yes, they win that game.
Yeah,
and
I mean, if the over hits in this game, Auburn wins. And then to make matters worse is Bo Nix did half of that on an injured ankle. I mean, he gets wrapped up, tackled kind of funny as he comes down. He gets kind of rolled up on by the defender, and he's limping around. And ultimately, TJ Finley had to come in for that final drive We still don't, as of Sunday morning, we don't know the extent of that injury, but
it sounds like it's pretty bad. There's a lot of rumors and message board rumblings and posters that are usually correct saying that he could be missing some time with this ankle injury. So we'll see.
Yeah, some of the talk is like, oh yeah, he had to go to EAMC for x-rays. Let me tell you real quick, guys. The university has, like the locker room has an x-ray machine, but they have a higher resolution x-ray machine and MRI machine than what the hospital has on campus. Like it's not part of the athletics building, but they have it. So it's not like 100% certainty he would have gone to EAMC. I don't necessarily think those rumors are right, but I mean, yeah, the injury is an actual injury. And so the assumption is we're going to see TJ Finley against South Carolina. I'm going to mentally just prepare for that. And if it turns out that's not what happens, so be it. But my question to you, Zach, is if TJ Finley is the starter for South Carolina in the Iron Bowl, does that change Auburn's expectations for those two games?
Yeah, I think you lose them both.
Are you okay with losing to South Carolina with your backup quarterback versus your starting quarterback?
No, Auburn should never lose to South Carolina in anything.
That is true.
I mean, it's the same. It's why it makes this Mississippi State loss so much. I mean, Auburn has been going to be bigger, faster, stronger, more talented than South Carolina. South Carolina is not a good team, but it's just at this point, the point of, the goal of a football team is to get better each and every week. And you can't invest all of your practice time into multiple quarterbacks. And so this comparison between Bo and Finley going in late, down a bunch of points, and he hasn't gotten a full season's worth of reps in at practice, like it's not the same thing. Do I think Bo is the guy to start over Finley? Yes, I absolutely do. But
yeah,
you can't compare them. Just when Finley fails, in those final two plays against Mississippi State, and the pro Bo crowd is like, see, I told you. It's like, you can't really do that because Finley in that situation is set up to fail because he hasn't been given all the attention that Bo has. And you shouldn't. You should not give as much attention to your backup quarterback as your starting quarterback. It's just, that's not how you run a football team. It's not how you get better from week to week. So for him to start the second to last game, assuming he's going to, it's not going to be good because he's just so far behind where he should be over the course of the season just because of the nature of it. So the expectations do change. But we'll see what happens. I mean, if Bo actually has a broken ankle, this is just me not being a doctor, but I didn't think you could walk on a broken ankle. Can you? Is that a thing? Is it a pain tolerance thing?
I think it's going to be something kind of like what you saw, and this is just what I do. We make jokes about this. Bringing it back to Braves pitcher Charlie Morton. Took a line drive off the shin in game 1 of the World Series. Finished the inning, went to the dugout, came back for the next inning, threw 6-7 more pitches. If you have multiple bones down there, and if it's like, say, the tibia, it could be fractured. You still have the structural stability. It's a pain tolerance issue. You don't have your full base underneath you. You can still walk around on it, but it's incredibly painful. And so I think if we find out that it's broken, it's going to be something like that. It's going to be something where it's not necessarily in the ankle. It's a little bit higher up on the ankle, and it's one of the supporting bones versus, like the femur. It's like it's something that you can walk around on it, but it's painful, and it's obviously not safe for him to play on, and that's why he probably couldn't make it back in the game. But I would guess being on the sidelines and not being fully active, it continued to swell and it continued to get worse, and that's why he couldn't go back in.
Yeah. Hopefully it's all rumor, and hopefully he is good to go by Saturday. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. If you haven't tried Built Bar by now, I don't know what else you're waiting on. Head over to Built.com. Check out all their amazing flavors. They've got something for everybody, depending on what you kind of want in a protein bar, your mid-afternoon snack. They're all packed with protein. They keep you full for a long time. I have mine for breakfast a ton. So check out Built Bars at Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. That is at Built.com. Lindsay Crosby, a few minutes left in this one. So Auburn now at 6-4, which sounds and feels way different than 7-3.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume they beat South Carolina. Let's assume they lose to Alabama. And you are then at 7-5 on the season, going to a bowl game. How will the Auburn fan base feel about that?
I think people, if Auburn lost to Mississippi State in a different way, I think there would be more people who would be okay with 7-5 in year one of Harsin than to have lost this way.
Yeah.
And I don't think people are going to get over this loss for a while. This is going to be seen as one of those, like, this was inexcusable. Like, I don't understand how this happened. And 7-5, well, I mean, we saw beginning of the season, I mean, we're all making jokes. Oh, yeah, they said we're going to go 6-6. We're definitely going to do better than that. And here we are. We could potentially lose the last 4 games, assuming we win South Carolina, lose Bama, and come out 7-5. I think you're going to see people want changes. And I think some of the changes you're going to want to see, or they're going to want to see, are going to be Derek Mason. If Auburn finishes this season 7-5, unless Derek Mason just has an absolute amazing game plan for South Carolina and Bama, and then going into the bowl game, I don't see a way after this loss where he sticks around. I think you're going to see people want some changes. That's going to be the thing people are going to ask for, because we all saw it. We saw 40 unanswered points, and it wasn't all the defense. Special teams was dreadful in this game, except for long snapper Jacob Quattlebaum. He killed it. Everybody else was bad.
Great. Yeah, right.
Jacob's my Quaddle buddy. All the rest of the special teams, Oscar Chapman with a bad fake. I don't know if that was planned, if that was something they did because he had trouble with the snap or something. We saw the bookstore miss another kick that seemed makeable, had the distance, leg was off. I went back and looked. The snap was fine. The hold was fine.
Well, you knew the snap would be fine. I knew the
snap would be great.
Right.
But it was, I mean, the kick was off. Special teams as a whole just looked pretty bad. And the offense didn't do a lot after those first 4 drives up until garbage time.
Auburn, they fumbled the opening kickoff. Fortunately, they landed back on it, but it's just like that could have been really bad.
Yeah, I mean, our special teams have got to the point where I want people to just fair catch everything. Just fair catch everything. I don't have any faith and confidence in whoever's back there, whatever we're doing. Put every kick off in the back of the end zone.
Though. I like Jarquez Hunter back there returning kicks.
I am a fan of that. Now that Sean Shivers is back, if you're giving less touches to Jarquez Hunter, he had 4 carries for 12 yards. I don't think he was targeted with a pass. If you're going to give him the ball 4 times, put him back there for returns. I mean, that's fine, because we need something going on. But special teams is an abject, I'm not going to say disaster, but special teams hasn't been great either. And I will point out, Auburn does not have a dedicated special teams coach. Mm-hmm. One of those things, a lot of people don't think it matters. Thing that I harp on a lot. They just don't have a dedicated coach just for special teams. So
I think most teams don't, though. I think that's a normal thing.
Some do, some don't. A lot of them do not. But it's something where, like, it's
ours is Watts, right? Watts is doing
Watts.
Special teams. Yeah,
he's doing outside linebackers and special teams, and as big of a role as our outside linebackers play in the game plan and in what we're trying to do as far as pass rush and all that kind of stuff, you wonder if maybe there's somebody else on staff that could take over that role, because you got to find somebody who, one, has special teams experience, which Watts does not, and then doesn't have too much time on his position group or whatever he's doing where he can help coordinate that. I mean, you got to do something, because obviously what you're doing now is not working. Watts isn't working now, so
not working. And I don't know what the healthy balance is of, okay, you're going to have growing pains in year 1 of a program, and like execution's just not there. And it seems like we're a little too far on the execution's not there side of the spectrum, but there is going to be a balance there where, like, you can't have, perfect execution year 1 into a new regime. And so, what are the correct expectations to have? I mean, you're a full season into it at this point. I mean, you're 10 games into it. I feel like the execution should be a little bit cleaner, and the whole, like, all right, we're still learning Derek Mason's defense. Like, I don't think that's appropriate anymore. If you can't teach it to a veteran defensive group over, spring, summer, fall camp in 10 weeks of season, to me, it's like it's either too complicated or you're not teaching it well. Like, it's got to be handled by this part of the year, and it hasn't been, and that's an issue.
It's kind of like the special teams thing. I mean, at some point, blocking for a field goal is blocking for a field goal. I mean, that doesn't change that much. The only real technique, not technique, but strategy stuff you're working on special teams is kick and punt coverage and kick and punt returns. That's really it. So when you see, it's a combination of execution there, and then just guys trying to do too much. I mean, that's all I can really think of. But it just feels weird. 10 games in, you shouldn't be seeing these kind of breakdowns on defense. You shouldn't be seeing, you shouldn't be seeing field goal blocks and muff punts and fumbles on special teams. And at a certain point, you have to say, all right, at what point do we make the change? And I think defensively, you probably make the change with Mason after this season, just based solely on this game.
You're pretty close. You got to be pretty close to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Mason is gone, and it may be a mutual thing, maybe Mason wants to leave. I would be shocked if the next DC is not Jeff Schmedding, the linebackers coach.
It absolutely is Jeff Schmedding. We have heard, you and I have heard from friend of the program, Brad LaRondo. They're really high on Jeff Schmedding. They think he's going to be a future college head coach one day. So I would not be surprised if that was him. He is the linebackers coach. He is the defensive run game coordinator, which if that's his role, I got to say Mississippi State's the team that cares the least about running the ball, and they had over 5 yards per carry Saturday. So maybe I'm not saying he's a slam dunk right away, but you kind of have to ask questions. Is it personnel? Is it scheme? But that does free up somebody for you to you can bring in a new coach now. If Mason leaves, everybody else stays, and Schmedding moves up one role. You can bring in, I assume you bring in a defensive backs coach, because right now that's Derek Mason.
Right.
And we've seen some issues with them. I mean, Smoke Monday, looks kind of lost in coverage sometimes. When he's closer to the line, he plays great. Like that little rover role. But when he's in deep coverage, he looks a little lost, and he gets beat by tight ends and stuff. And you have to wonder how much of that is schematic and how much of that is the player. But definitely change is going to be made this offseason based off this one game.
Lindsay Crosby, where can people find you and hear you, my friend?
I am at Auburn Banker on the socials and in our Discord, and you can listen to me 7 to 9 Monday through Friday on News Talk WANI.
That's Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Zac Blackerby, show on Twitter at Locked On Auburn, on Instagram at Auburn Podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy, in the offseason, predicted Mississippi State would beat Auburn, and I gave him crap for it all season. And I got a text about the start of the fourth quarter, and I'm like, leave me alone, Gordy. But you nailed it. He was correct. So go check out Locked On SEC for your second listen today. We'll see you tomorrow right here on Locked On Auburn.